The Spanish-American War at sea is generally only remembered for how stupidly one-sided it was. Over the short course of the war, only 2 battle fleet actions ever occurred, one at Manila Bay and one at Santiago de Cuba, and in both cases, the Spanish came out looking decidedly worse. In fact, the only US's casualty at Manila Bay was a sailor who died of a heart attack. This is pretty largely due to the fact that the Spanish Navy was not really capable of standing up to the USN in any large way, due simply to the fact that they had neither technological nor numerical superiority, and to be honest, they weren't even close. However, those of us who have spent a little bit too much time diving into the naval side of the Spanish-American War will know that Spain did have one chance to defeat the US Navy in a full-scale brawl. After Admiral Dewey and his flagship Olympia defeated the Spanish Asiatic fleet at the one-sided Battle of Manila Bay, the Spanish decided that they wanted to get their revenge. Most of Spain's Pacific-based naval assets had been destroyed at the battle, but the main striking power of the Spanish Armada was still based out of mainland Spain. Their only battleship, the Pelayo, and the large armored cruiser Emperador Carlos V were ordered to form a squadron along with 3 destroyers that would sail around the globe to the Philippines and attack the US Asiatic fleet. It was a daring plan, but one that did have a high chance of succeeding. None of the US ships they were expected to attack had anything like the armament needed to take down the Pelayo, and although Emperador Carlos would find herself largely outnumbered by the US protected cruisers, her superior firepower coupled with support from Pelayo would likely be enough to destroy the US fleet. The Spanish force was placed under the command of Rear Admiral Manuel de la Camera, and the warships left Spain in June of 1898 bound for the Suez Canal. Extensive preparations had already been made for the journey, with scheduled coaling stops planned all around the world to make up for the low cruising range of Pelayo and Emperador Carlos. For the first leg of the journey, things were going relatively well, and if things continued to go this way, there was nothing stopping the Spanish from reaching the Philippines. However, as things often do, the plan ended up devolving into a bit of chaos. Aware of the sailing of the Spanish squadron, the US managed to convince their ally Great Britain to put strong neutrality regulations on the Suez Canal, basically meaning that by the time the Spanish arrived there, they were no longer allowed to pass through it. Reconciling himself that he would have to take his ships around the tip of Africa, Camera turned his ships around and began sailing back through the Mediterranean. If he hurried quickly, he might still be able to make it. The US also realized this fact, and on the off chance that they were actually unable to prevent the Spanish from getting to Manila, they dispatched the monitor USS Monterey to join the Asiatic fleet, an act that would hopefully give Admiral Dewey a desperately needed counter to the Pelayo. However, as it would turn out, this act wouldn't end up being necessary. On the morning of July 3, 1898, the Spanish squadron based out of Santiago de Cuba was brought to action and destroyed by a US battle fleet. Admiral Camera, realizing that this freed up a large number of US naval assets for a raid on the Spanish coast, turned his ships around and sailed back for Spain.